Thank you, Javi, and thank you for hosting us tonight. I don't know if any of you know, but we actually live about an hour north of here. We recently relocated. This is our first time talking in this area, so it's really cool to be here tonight and sharing this moment with you.
Thank you for having us. So, thank you. Okay, I'm Dejha.
And I'm Ania, but I feel like Britney Spears with this mic.
You look like Britney Spears with
So
that mic.
there's that.
So Operator started in 2016, so that will be almost 10 years ago in March that this practice has existed. If I could just touch the right buttons. That would make me a real technologist. So we began our practice in 2016 in LA. Ania's background.
I am a choreographer and dancer and performance artist. So before starting to work with Dejha, I had an independent practice, really using the body as a medium, directing kind of movement-based films, creating performances, choreographing. This is some of my past work.
And my practice before I met Ania was in large-scale immersive environments, installations. I'm a multimedia artist. I studied human-computer interaction, very interested in physical computing, as well as making technology something that is present, but also invisible at the same time.
And in both cases of our independent work before Operator, the human body, as you can see, is central. Mine, the body kind of as a material, as a medium and a site to work. And then Dejha's human-computer interaction. So asking different questions, but the body still central in both.
And the three pillars of our work are immersive environments, creative technology, and performance. So in any given work, you'll see these elements come together. We don't really have an allegiance to any one medium. We really think of the concept first, heroing the concept, and kind of designing what that vehicle is. What is that right connection point to take what we want to say and who we want to say it to? And we choose the form based on that. So that's why you'll see in our work, it takes many different outputs. So we're, as I said, allegiant to the concept, kind of heroing that aspect first. And we're also allegiant to our cat, Claude, who likes to take baths with me.
And me.
And you too. Yeah.
But we're not here to talk about cats, maybe our next talk, but we're here to talk about digital art. So we were kind of asking the question when we started working together, which was right around the time that there was also a lot of experiential marketing and like digital art, but actually just selfie museums and the huge conflation of digital art and experiential marketing and this big kind of clusterfuck of like what is what. And a lot of confusion in the public about what digital art is. Is it just like big, shiny, flashy things? What is its potential beyond that? And we were looking at on the spectrum of spectacle to critical, kind of where is digital art and how does our work and what we want to do together help to move that norm somewhere else or invite people to think about what art made with digital tools can be and how it can be different than maybe what they've been conditioned to expect it to look and feel like.
And as Ania was saying, when you think of headlines, or if you quickly Google immersive digital art or digital art, you'll get a lot of claims of high sales, or we have this little chart here that I can follow. The sale price, the most. Are you entertained? 100%. Entertainment is often really highly valued in the sort of mainstream billboards of digital art. Chance of offense, 0%, because that wouldn't be good for sales. Selfies generated billions, because that's good for engagement. Spectacle, check mark, 100%. Novel technologies, everything, everywhere, all at once. How many people attended? Everyone, plus every influencer, Timothée Chalamet, and I guess
Kylie.
Yeah, his new girlfriend. Generative AI, of course, all of the buzzwords. How big is the data set? Is the screen size fucking massive? All these kinds of things are things that can often get conflated with digital art and give digital art a bad rap.
Or just a limited representation. And I want to say also, a lot of this has
we
to
like
do...
big sales.
Yeah, we like big
we
sales.
like big sales.
But also, a lot of this has to do not just with, artists aren't thinking big enough, but it has to do with way larger questions about the economic infrastructure of creating art that uses technology and needs massive teams. And where is that money coming from? Do the people paying for the art have an interest? Does a museum need to justify their programming in order to say how many people they're getting through the door? So there's a lot of obviously underlying economic questions around art infrastructure that lead to this, but it is kind of still where we are.
And this is Marcel Duchamp. And here, he didn't really say this, but we're imagining that he did, which is, I just need the BSA, the biggest screen available. And, I think of him as a conceptual artist and, how would that actually fit if he chose just, the tool because it was novel, the screen because it was big, the data set because it was ginormous and it had to do with space, even though I love many artworks that have to do with space. But you know what I mean? And so for us, these were kind of things that we wanted to say, hey, there's more than that.
Mm-hmm.
And we wanted to create a framework, an operator rule set for art and technology. We put art and technology in quotes because we don't think that there should be separatism. There shouldn't be. There's art and there's technology. There's art in clay. There's art in paint. There's art in charcoal, whatever. Because it is to put the emphasis where it really shouldn't be. And so we don't really like those separate, sort of categories, but we put them in quotes for that reason. So for us, this is really our rules for our practice to avoid the tricks and gimmicks when creating art that happens to use technology. We were seeing a lot in our research early on, especially in 2016, 2017, when Ania was mentioning when we were living in LA and Venice Beach and experiential marketing was huge. You would see, all of these sort of artworks using technology, and the tech world was eye-rolling the art world. And then you had the art world eye-rolling the tech world for gimmicky uses of art for their tech projects. And so you kind of both had, you had both parties say, is that all there is?
All there is? Is that all there is? If that's all there is, my friends, then let's keep dancing.
It's a good song. And so we'll bring you through the rules for art and technology so that we can kind of draw a framework, a sandbox for like, what would make it so that we couldn't fall into those tricks and gimmicks if we, aligned with this rule set? I'll let you take the first few.
Number one, no tech demos, because we have technology conferences for technical demonstrations, so they don't need to happen in the art world.
I think I want to go back to that one for a second.
Yeah, I have one more thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
And so essentially, if the concept of the artwork is saying what a technology can do, then it might not be art. It might be a tech demo.
Right. It's like if you and I were having a phone conversation.
Hi.
Hi. How are you?
I'm good.
You're good. It's really cool that we're talking on the phone real time. Like you're in Barcelona and I'm in Berlin, and this is really amazing. What do you think about that?
It is. Imagine everything, all this material between us that's connecting us so we can sit and hear each other's voices from afar.
Mm-hmm. Do you hear my voice now? Hello?
Wait. Yeah, I do.
Hello?
I do hear that.
Hello? Okay, I gotta go. Bye.
Bye.
Ciao. So it was like we had a conversation about the technology, but like didn't actually have a conversation. We forgot about that part. So we don't want to do that in art, right? The other thing is visible technology doesn't necessarily mean high tech. When you see the technology, doesn't mean, it's first of all, it's probably the thing that if you make it more invisible, it's even more high tech anyway. But it's not something to rely on. Additionally, we don't want to rely on scale. A lot of our works have huge productions, huge teams, huge spaces, big, but it's not enough. Because if it wasn't big, would it still be good? We have to ask ourselves that question.
And also ask, when the tech is no longer novel, will the work still hold up? So this work by Namjoon Paik, for example, is not brilliant and moving because it's using the newest model of a television. Even as these TVs are old, even as it's actually difficult to conserve and show it because the parts are so old you can't even find them, doesn't mean that the work is any less powerful to people who see it now so many decades later. And also, a la Yvonne Rainer, one of my favorite choreographers, no to spectacle. And so we always want to use the technology conceptually, not just technically. So asking questions about who made it and why, and how does the history of that technology or its dominant use right now, how is that feeding into our work? Because it is a material in the same way that Dejha gives the example of being a designer and using a typeface and understanding how has that font been used, who made it, and it's always going to be attached when you're using it to whatever history it's had, and technologies are the same way. The interests, who made it, how it's used are always kind of like, even if silently or suddenly, they are part of the work that we are creating if we're acknowledging that.
And finally, tech doesn't age well, but concepts do. And so if we just follow that thread, we feel that we should be in a pretty good place. But who knows? These are now very old rules
These
that we
are
have. We
old.
might need to add some more at some point. Early works?
Yeah, so early, starting 2016 to 2022, we were making mostly, I would say, performance installations, but we were also in LA, and we had a lot of friends who were musicians who would say, hey, I have a few thousand. Do you want to like make a music video for us? So most of our early work was actually music videos because it was the only time that someone gave us some money for us to make something. So it was really just like, where can we try to squeeze our creativity in? Then we were doing brand collaboration. So in a way, that weird like experiential marketing hype helped because there was, brands like Adidas that are like, we need to do something cool and Instagrammable to launch a shoe. And we were an LA artist. And so we got opportunities to kind of make art, but in these kind of contexts that were not always about art. They were kind of like jobs, but it ranged from London Fashion Week browser experiences to our own performance installations that were art, to fashion shows, to music videos, to all kinds of performances in whatever context really would invite us and maybe give us some money.
And we said yes to Adidas, but only if at the shoe launch, the performers could be barefoot.
They went for it.
Yeah, and they went
It
for
took
it.
several back and forth emails, but we were like, we can't wake them up from the dream. And they were like, oh, okay, fine. But it worked.
But we would always get this question. You have these wonderful, beautiful experiences. They're very expensive to make, and there's no way for them to make money. So do you have something you can sell? And our kind of thought was like, well, no, not really. We aren't really sure how to monetize experiential art, and we don't want to switch our medium to flat art just so that you could sell our work. So this brings us to chapter 2, which is nothing to sell.
No luxury fries. Yeah. Okay. So we had this really strange moment where we were getting a lot of recognition for our work. We were invited to speak at the Christie's Art and Tech Summit. We had our first museum commission. It looked like everything was great. But then this is a moment where we were in Hong Kong. We were picked up in a very expensive car, driven to a 5-star hotel. And then we were in the hotel room and we couldn't afford anything on the menu. And so we were having this like strange, why are we at Christie's on the stage talking about millions of artworks and like we can't afford the fries in the hotel that they put us up in. So we kind of realized at this moment, while we're having fun, while this is nice to be acknowledged, Dejha, we would eat enough food for the entire day because the breakfast buffet was free. So this is like how we dealt with the Hong Kong like poor luxury experience. But anyway, we realized this is probably not sustainable, and we need to find a way kind of to not change our medium entirely, but also not be in these kind of positions where we're it wasn't cool. And so 1 + 1 = 0. We realized Dejha working in kind of immersive environments and me working with performance, both the enemies of the art market in terms of making money. 1 + 1 = 0 for our practice. And we would often get asked, can you mint something from your archive? Which of course we could have, but we also felt we were putting so much care and effort into the details of everything that we were releasing and the context and everything that it felt kind of weird to take something that was meant to be lived and experienced and take a photo of it, no matter how beautiful that photo was, and then sell it to someone as an artwork. Like if we're going to sell something that someone's going to hang on their wall. We want to design that as an experience of something you encounter on the wall, not really take archival material or a photo that documented a moment that was the artwork, and then call that photo the artwork. So this is the reason why we decided to approach the market as a site to create for, to kind of solve the money problem, but not change our medium.
Also in 2019, we were touring our latest exhibition, which was called On View at the Scab Museum of Art in Georgia in the US. And it had all this, it was like one of those technology projects that looked like it was completely organic, and people would say, how is this digital art? I don't get it. How is this art at all? It's like experiential art. Is that real art? So we weren't really fitting into any sort of crowd very comfortably. And in 2019, we went to the Crypto and Digital Art Fair, Kadath in New York, and they're focused on blockchain and crypto. The first CryptoPunk was sold, I think, to the Winklevoss brothers that night for like $400. And so it's like, you had this like whole community brewing. And what I loved about that community is that they were open and they said, well, you're experimenting with digital art. You're doing some crazy stuff. Why don't you come here and show what you have to do? And I think that says a lot about that community and that time. And so we were around and buzzing around these like blockchain circles at that time, but we weren't using it in our work yet. And we thought, when the time has come, when the concept is right, we'll use it. And when we finally arrived to looking at it, we said, all right, let's use blockchain as a medium. Let's use the smart contract as a medium. And let's think through how we can extend our work on privacy. Because as I said, we had just finished the work in 2019 on View, which was about, selfie culture and experiential marketing and how we view art in the choreography of viewing art with your back against the art and the phone here and the cell. I mean, we've all done it, but it's like there's other ways to view art too. And so we were really looking at this and we thought, how can we look at privacy not in a Web 2 context, but in a Web 3 context? And how does that function? How does the sort of, I would say, like the tension between privacy and transparency that is inherent in blockchain technology, how can we explore that? And we created something called the Privacy Collection. So the Privacy Collection started in 2022 and is ongoing. I'll let you walk us through some of the works.
Sure.
Or just say anything you want.
These are the lots. So Privacy Key 00. We approached this thinking we want to start by releasing something that is kind of more familiar and then get weirder and weirder and weirder over time. So we started with Privacy Key 00, which is like a very glossy 3D digital key that looked like something that you would see on a platform. And then we slowly started, because we also were like, yes, we're going to use blockchain, but also what can we bring into the crypto art community that we're not seeing a lot of? And at that time, you could scroll through hundreds of pages and never see the human body on a platform. So we felt like we want to maybe start with like what people recognize and be like, oh, cool. But then like slowly end up bringing people into our world. So Privacy Key then attempts was filmed performance where it had a like AI mocap glass avatar going in and out of sync with my body. Then Privacy Portraits, which is where we anonymized collectors' portraits through analog algorithms and a performance installation in London over 3 days. Then Unknown Sitter, and then Human Unreadable. We're finally getting to the subject of generative art today, which is we're going to talk about more now based on kind of generative choreographic systems.
Yeah, and if we looked at like the Privacy Portraits, it was kind of we were looking at the site to create for as the PFP, right? And people being known for being unknown and people hiding within transparent systems. And we were very interested in that. And so when we got to, what is the next site in crypto culture that we're going to create for, we thought, well, on-chain long-form generative art might be one. And so we started exploring more early generative art at that time, also earlier in our career as well, because, and we'll get to in a little bit, chance dance, chance operations. There's a rich history of generative art in many different fields, not just computational. choreography or not just computational fields. But in early generative art, and I feel like I'm probably speaking to the choir a little bit, but I'll say this anyway for any folks who are not familiar with generative art. In the early generative art era, there was an element of curation, right? So you would have the computer, you would create a program. The computer would, through a plotter or through printing, generate an output. And you could create hundreds of these, thousands of these, right? But then you, as the artist, were able to look at them and say, well, that one's no good. This one's amazing. I never want anyone to see this one. And you can kind of curate the best of class of the output. But that all changed. With long form on-chain generative art and platforms like Art Blocks and FX Hash, in which that program, whatever it outputs, it is being minted on the spot. The artist nor the collector knows what they're getting, and it's there forever, or as long as the blockchain exists, and you can't take it down. So that's a lot of pressure, I think, for the collector, of course, but I think as an artist, I was so nauseated the day of the Human Unreadable sale, because I was like, how is this going to go? Because you look at thousands and thousands, over 10,000 outputs in the process of like fine-tuning an algorithm, but sometimes you're surprised. And this is our friend Iskra, which some of you might know her, but she's a wonderful artist. So I think for us, we were looking at that, but it was also important, how are we going to maintain the human body and also human experience and experiential art within the arc of this practice and within the arc of this artwork? And we thought, well, historically, performance has been primarily collected through notation, documentation, maybe, restaging rights, but it hasn't been privileged in the same way that visual arts have, in which it can operate within the art market, which I'm not necessarily suggesting. If you're an artist and not in the art market, I'm not necessarily saying you should do that, but at least there's no real option for the performing arts.
Which is something that performance and dance shares with digital art before the introduction of digital scarcity and more ease of proving ownership over a unique asset. And even in the cases where you had dance or scores in the collection of MoMA, like this one by Merce Cunningham, for example, they're not really collecting like the movement. They're collecting this score as like an artifact, like a piece of paper you would find in someone's desk that's important. It's not really about, I own these movements. So it's even in the way that it is represented in collections up until this point is still not really about collecting or owning movement. So we thought, yes, we're going to make our next lot site-specific to long-form on-chain generative art. And also, in that act, because we're nuts, make dance collectible as an art object, because why not?
And that gave us a double challenge. So for any of you who, create anything with code and algorithms and develop generative art yourselves, you know that there's this process of iteration with the algorithm where, you can't really define exactly the output, but you can design the soul of the program and you can give it a feeling and you can give it your sort of frame and your artistic criteria for whatever that artwork is that you want it to be. But you have to do it through an iterative process of intensely outputting, adjusting code, outputting, adjusting code, outputting, adjusting code. And you'll find you'll be 10,000 outputs in and you're like, oh, this is looking terrible. How do we get it to stop doing that thing? How do I get it to do more of this other thing? Well, we had to do it with that, right? The visual aspect, but we had the double challenge of we're going to create generative choreography, right? That is going to be fully on-chain, is not going to be able to be erased once it's minted. And so we need to make sure that the dance is good as well. So this was the concept that we brought to Eric Snowfro of Art Blocks, and he was like, let's do it. Which, Art Blocks is known as a visual art community, not a dance community. And people were saying, this is a really bad idea. It's too high concept. It's too complex.
People don't like black and white.
They don't like black and white. They just want pretty images, and we're like, well, let's,
maybe you're wrong.
Maybe you're wrong. And let's give them a little bit more credit and see. So we created Human Unreadable. And this has roots in computational choreography. Generative choreography is not a new thing. Maybe you can bring us through some history.
Yeah, it's pulling from a lot of different histories, mainly chance dance, Merce Cunningham. So he would do, similar to John Cage, rolling dice. And if you roll a 3, then you jump, and then you roll a 1, and that means that you turn. And then, so you're rolling dice and you're letting chance determine the order of how movements go in a sequence. So analog, but still the same thing, just an analog algorithm. And of course, the experiments in art and technology movement of the 1960s, where you had New York contemporary artists collaborating with Bell Labs engineers. So it was 9 evenings of theater and engineering, where I love when you read about E.A.T. how much of this was a failure. It's really inspiring. Because I think what's the problem, I think a lot
And really smart people were failing.
Yeah, because smart people fail. But also back to
That's how they got smart.
That's how they got smart. And also, like, that's back to the infrastructure question. Like, do we have the infrastructure for artists to try experimental things enough to fail? And that would, for me, be a sign of like a healthier art ecosystem than needing to be risk averse. So anyway, the failures of E.A.T. and its successes, because I still think a lot of what they created now is better than, it's just beautiful. And then the history of more directly computational choreography. So Anne Olivia Cordiero, who's now our dear friend, and we're working on something with her, and also Jean Beeman. So one of the very first generative art exhibitions was a cybernetic serendipity at the ICA London in the 60s, and Random Dances by Jean Beeman was in that exhibition. So really, like, generative dance has been very present in the entire history of the medium since the beginning of art being made with computers.
I'm losing connection with this. Okay.
And yeah, we kind of said this earlier, but we were feeling like the current state of digital art is quite disembodied. And there might be a reason for that. I think we figured out the reasons for that when we tried to make it embodied.
Yes, which we're going to tell you about now. So embarking on the journey of creating embodied generative art, we said, okay, we want this to have many phases. We're not just going to end this as the mint on art blocks, right? We're going to have an artwork that happens in 3 acts where we start by obfuscating the human. And by the end of these 3 acts, there will be the slow recovery of the human and the human standing right in front of you.
Wait, could you go back one?
Yeah.
And then when people were saying they don't like black and white, we said, look, there's purple.
It's purple.
Because there's glass. And so there was some prisms in a few of the pieces. And we were like, hey, there's color. They're going to love it.
It's our most colorful work yet.
It is one of the most, but I do love that purple.
Okay, so the 3 acts are, number 1, the mint on art blocks. So this happened in May 2023. 400 artworks were minted that day. And then there was Act 2. Act 2 happened later in 2023. And what Act 2 is, it's essentially notation, a choreographic dance score, which is revealing the unique choreography that is behind the image that you purchased, that you collected on that day of Act 1. But what you didn't know, I mean, if you read the text, which I don't know that everyone did, but like it was certainly not the reason they were showing up to get a choreographic score. But there's dance behind it, and we'll get into, how these two are connected in a bit. And then Act 3 is the final performance of the first 100 sequences of the Human Unreadable collection. So this is where you will be live in a room with 1923 dancers, and you'll be face to face, and there will be an experience not mediated by technology, but you will be looking at computational choreography and generative art in the flesh. This will be happening, we can't say where yet, but it's happening in New York City in November of 2026, which is this year. Yes. And it's the only thing we're working on right now. So Act 1, do you want to speak about this?
So I'm sure many of you are familiar with how Art Blocks works. Essentially, the project was available to mint, and all 400 of the works were created and generated. So we're seeing them for the first time at the moment of minting by the collector.
I think I'll never do that again.
That's some of them. And so at that moment, as Dejha mentioned, with the conceptual arc being the slow recovery of the human, at that point, the human is not yet visible. So here is motion data. And it also, we hid the names of like the bones. So even if you wanted to like go find what the elbow was doing or where things were, you wouldn't. So everything was completely obfuscated. So the human was kind of hiding fully within these images. And then Act 2 was the reveal of the choreographic score. And there's a lot of really advanced notation systems. But as we were considering the site, we didn't want to expect that collectors were also going to go and learn Laban notation, for example. So we made the scores more stick figure, very accessible. So a collector, someone who never has thought about dance in their life, or can give it to their child and have the child interpret the dance. The point is to kind of get people to respond and like bring algorithmic art into their own bodies and try things. So trying to keep it as accessible as possible was very top of mind.
And here you see, so we deployed a website in which if you were a collector, you had a Human Unreadable, you could connect your wallet, and then you could reveal the score. So you can see here some 2-ups of the Act 1 and then that related Act 2.
So like this dance sequence, for example, created this image. So then you were like, this is my image. And you're like, oh, these are the moves that made that. And then we'll go into how those moves made that in a bit.
Right, because the dance in this case existed before the image, even though it was not fully visible. And so what we did is we gave collectors the option for revealing their score. So I think only 88 people or like 90 people revealed their scores. Most of them, they're keeping it in the plastic, maybe for resale value. I don't know. But at any point, you can reveal your score. Maybe we shut it down at some point. I don't know. But the thing is that it's very important that these 2 NFTs, that while you have 2 NFTs, they're soul bound, right? They're token bound. They use something called an owner of function, which means that you can't transfer or sell this Act 2 NFT. So whoever owns Act 1 automatically owns the Act 2 of the respective piece.
Because they're both the art. The dance is the art just as much as the image is the art. So then, as Dejha mentioned, Act 3 is the live performance, where we went from fully obfuscated human, where obviously there's human silhouettes inside of the images.
We will in Act 3. Sorry.
Did I say something else?
I think you said in the past, but I might be wrong. It doesn't matter.
It totally doesn't matter.
No one caught that.
So in Act 1, we have like these silhouettes in the images. So they're kind of, the point of that was hinting the human is here, but not really like showing too much, but letting you know like there's someone here. Then Act 2, you start to see what did the human do through these like kind of sad, childlike hieroglyphic drawings.
You did great. Those were amazing.
Fun fact, those were supposed to be the stand-in drawings, and then we were going to hire a real illustrator to make them nice. And then they ended up saying, these are great. And so my like sad, I'm really not a drawer, ended up being like the ones on the scores. But then in Act 3, we end, so we make this whole circle from, it started with the human, which is just me in a motion capture suit, going through all this obfuscation, then slowly coming back, and then returning to this moment where the pinnacle of a generative artwork is a bunch of people in an audience witnessing generative art through the body as an interface and the absence of all technological mediation, witnessing each other, the most profound thing we can experience. And this is how, when I said we realized why no one was really diving heavily into embodied generative art, it's because we had all these really romantic ideas of like, dance is going to be collectible and the economy for ephemeral art forms and generative choreography on art blocks, and we'll store everything on chain. And this is how we were sleeping, and it was completely delusional. But then we got so far in that it was totally not possible to turn back. And Kafka has this amazing aphorism where he says there is a point that must be where you reach a point where you know there is no turning back, and that is the point that must be reached. We definitely reached that point, and there was no way to kind of undo. So we kept going, and in the end, it was okay, but it was 100% delusional / manifestation energy.
Okay, so we're going to bring you through how we made this. maybe answer a lot of your questions that you might be having, and fill in some of these gaps. So to get to Act 1, it took us 9 months. We worked with 25 individuals to bring this to life, a team of dancers, engineers, and this is a project that I think I love this thing that Isaac said. So Isaac is the lead engineer of Human Unreadable. He's a blockchain security engineer. This is the first time he made art. And he was like, I think what's interesting, because someone asked in a talk in New York in 2023 to him, like, how's it different to like, do your normal job and then like work with Operator and make art? And he said, well, in engineering, when it works, the job is done. But in art, when it works, the job begins. Because there was this moment of the last 5% of the project, he was like, I'm going insane. I was like, trust me, this last 5% is what makes it art. He's like, it all looks the same to me. I have no idea. Like, what? I'm glad you're driving the ship right now. But I always like to quote him on this. So here, what you can see is the entire method and the entire process of what it took to create Human Unreadable. And so we're going to bring you step through step. And the first is starting with the movement library, designing the actual moves, creating the moves. And before we can create the moves, we have to have a conceptual framework for how the movements will become what they will be.
What are the movements too?
Yeah. What is the conceptual core of that? Yeah. And then in this case, if you want to talk about that.
And in this case, we really wanted to protest against kind of the idea of, or in the aesthetics of like modernist design and like rationality and like clean and minimalism and like no one, like also the big divide between design and art. Like one is subjective and has no rules and is like human and immature, and the other is like more sophisticated because it follows the grid and blah, blah, blah. So we were feeling like there was a lot of like one side represented. And so we took also focusing on the body, which is a very messy thing. The movements are all kind of things that would not typically be allowed if you were trying to create something that was objective and likable. So we were taking emotions like shame and joy and like letting the body just completely freak out. Like all the messiness that's rejected was kind of the framework for all of these movements that made up the sequences. These are my former dance students in LA. So I used to teach them dance. And then like 5 years later, I come back and I'm like, we're going to do algorithmic choreography. And they're like, okay. So then I came with all of these movements and we did them together. We rolled dice, wrote down the sequences, and then I watched them perform live so that we could look and be like, okay, there's too many things spinning. There's too many things on the floor. There's too many things slow. And I could kind of watch how the sequences were feeling and adjust and add movements needed so that, as Dejha mentioned, we can't have just the image look good, but in the end, these are going to be performed. So all the sequences have to have reliably desirable outputs as well. So there was a lot of iteration of the movement library.
And once we were happy with, or I should say you were happy with, look, I was happy with it, but it was important that you approved the choreography. We put Ania in a motion capture suit. We went to LA for this because I think at the time we were living in Berlin. And we captured all of the final moves in high resolution motion data. And you can see here, because we had to, when you get the raw files, we received them in FBX. So this is like the same resolution if you were going to rig motion data to like an avatar or a game. So there's a lot of info there. And you can see here, there's 3 seconds of movement, and we had to convert this FBX into a CSV and do a few other steps, which I'll tell you about in a second. But just for 3 seconds of movement, this is the spreadsheet for that. That's a lot of data, a lot that the human body, that technology of the human body can express in 3 seconds, makes the computer, it takes it this, which we were like, okay, we're going to have to downsample this, but we still need to preserve the essence of the moves. And why do we need to downsample it? Because
I have a comment about the spreadsheet.
Oh, sure,
quick,
sure.
Because
Perdona.
Because I think working with technology a lot, and as a choreographer, and obviously I'm biased, I looked and it's like I'm amazed at everything and how it came together. But also at the same time, when I look at this, I just remember thinking, we live inside the most sophisticated technology. Like I was just amazed at like what our bodies can do. Like without all of this, like we can read and communicate so much that even with all of this, there's so much missing. There's so much that like we just read and communicate and express through our bodies. So it made me, and our next project that we did after Human Unreadable, Repeat as Necessary, is really about like honoring the body as a technology. And I think a lot of that was inspired by this realization of what it does so miraculously, so simply.
This was a lot of data. The Ethereum blockchain is good for many things: a transparent ledger, anonymity, decentralized systems, all sorts of stuff. But it's not really meant to store a lot of data. And when we went to calculate how much it would cost to just upload the data as it was like something like $200,000. So we didn't have $200,000. And even if we did, it wouldn't have been the right way to approach it. So we had to put ourselves on bone budgets. And so this is our gas calculator, you can see. And the gas fees in the end only cost us a little under 4,000 USDC, which was nice. And it was $3.23 per bone per move. So it was like something like $90, give or take, for each of the moves. So that we could afford. And the way that we did that is we had to take the FBX file and turn it into a CSV. And there wasn't any software that we could use at the time to do this conversion. So we built our own in a Touch Designer app where we would have the FBX viewer here in the corner. We could change some parameters, and then we can inspect frame by frame and then have an identical frame by frame output of the spreadsheet of numbers to the right. This way we could verify that the frames that we were going to keep of the movement, because we downsampled the movement by saying, okay, we're going to have 14 frames instead of 30 frames. We're going to have 60 bones instead of 120 bones in the avatar. And then this is how we were able to, preserve the essence of the moves. After we exported and we were happy with the downsampling, which, again, you were happy with it. This was a tool that you were
I wasn't
using,
happy to
actually.
be in spreadsheets.
Sorry.
I became a dancer because I really don't like to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And what that took is I had to do the move, and then I had to say what bones are needed to express this move fully. And so I would
like, do you really need all the bones on
do
you?
I really need my kneecap for that? No. But then I started, it actually became a little fun because at one point I started being like, there's anatomy. So maybe if I say where my ankle is and I say where my hip is and I say where my knee is, I don't have to say where my thigh is because there's only one place it could be if my knee and my hip are there. So then I got excited because I would like save on bones just because I'm like, there's only so many possibilities. So I started just like angry, like typing, yes, I need my shin. Yes, I need my toe, blah, blah, blah. But then I was like, oh, I can save one here because there's limited possibilities. So it ended up being kind of okay.
Bone budgeting.
But I'm still glad that I don't do that every day.
Well, anyway, just to wrap up this slide here, Touch Designer output to a CSV, and then we would ingest that into a spreadsheet where Ania would say, yes, we need the head. No, we don't need the head. Yes, we need the left calf. No, we don't need it. Which frames that she wanted to keep. And then that would export to a CSV, and then we would take that CSV and we would validate it by ingesting it back into Touch Designer, watching the playback. Ania would confirm, yes, that's what I meant. Looks good. It's legible as my choreography. We can move on and only spend $4,000. And here in the end, this is what the motion data looked like, where we obfuscated all of the bones. So all of this is stored on chain for everyone to see, but you would need the motion ABI in order to decode which body parts. So Andrea could just go online and steal the motion data and put it on your beautiful avatars. Andrea Campos here. He's an amazing artist. Also our roommate too. So cute that our roommates are here. Anyway, so after we figured out the motion data aspect, we said, okay, now that we have that, we can store it on the Ethereum blockchain. Now let's make a choreographic algorithm. What this is, it's kind of like when Ania was talking about chance dance. It's like taking dice and rolling the dice and saying, okay, number 2, number 14, number 27, like it's pulling, picking the numbers at random and then pulling from the motion data on chain. And this is a contract that is stored on chain as well. So like every time, but it's deterministic, which means that you can always prove that your way back, to that token hash based randomness. You can always prove your way back to it, right? So and you also will only get the same output only one time, or it will always be unique, right? And so what we did with this algorithm is that we had to define the length of the sequence, what moves were in the sequence, were there pauses, were there tempo changes, halftime, real time, double time.
Performer orientation is where they're facing, not sexual orientation, in case anyone's wondering.
Maybe both. North, south, east, west, right? And also there's the underlying motion data, right? So in this deterministic choreographic algorithm, you get this kind of output that looks like this right here. So once you minted your piece, first this was identified or this was created, and then your piece was created out of that, which I'll get to in a second. So this whole process took us about 5 months, and the team was like, we haven't made anything visual yet. I thought we were making something for art blocks. Like, isn't that like a visual platform? And so we're like, don't worry about that part. We had to get through the hard stuff first. And so 5 months into this process, once we sorted all of that out, we said, okay, now what will this look like? So we went back to the conceptual framework and groundwork for the privacy collection, in which each lot of the privacy collection follows this like basic, simple rule set of using transparent materiality, whether digital or physical, the core of the human body, elements of X-ray, being able to see below the surface, and the bigger one that we have already discussed, which was that had to be crypto site specific,
and the human body.
And the human body
is also in each of the lots.
Yeah. So,
and a lot of we actually had this moment where we realized these were going to be still at this funny time when we were really deep into this process, and someone said, "Okay, so they're choreography, so they're going to move," and we were like. We both said at the same time without ever discussing it, no, they're still. And the person was very confused. Like, why are you doing a movement-based thing and you're making still images? But we thought it was exciting and more interesting to kind of infer motion. And again, the whole thing is about hiding and revealing. And then we were in Pantelleria, the volcanic island off of Sicily, and we were on this walk, and then we saw this volcanic rock, and we were like, this is Human Unreadable. So we felt like what it did, it took this motion that happened in the end, like you see where movement happened, but it leaves you this kind of still result. So when we saw this, we were like, okay, there's a parallel. Somehow Human Unreadable is also this. There's movement that happened that created this thing that you're now looking at still in the same way that happened, and we came across that.
So once we knew we were making a still image, and there was going to be elements of glass, we were like, okay, we're going to make generative glass. So this kind of thing, I know there's some 3D folks in here, but if you had to render glass, it's like that takes a long time to do, right? You're going to be grinding your computer for a while to get, 3 seconds of or 1 frame or 5 frames. But here, all of this had to render live in the browser real time. And so we went on this journey of making glass, which then became our new rabbit hole. And I'll tell you about that in a second. But the elements in every Human Unreadable are 2 pieces of glass, generative glass, a body part, a motion path, and also an X-ray machine, which is like this digital X-ray machine that all the elements go into this final X-ray machine in our code base and give the final output. But first, the glass made with math. I really like to show how bad our glass was.
Because good work comes from bad work.
Good work comes from bad work. It was really bad for like the whole time. And I was like, I don't know if we're going to be able to figure this out. So here are all of our early bad glass, but then we finally got it to this like beautiful, shiny glass that you were seeing a moment ago. And then what we did was we made it shitty again. I was like, okay, now let's degrade it. Now that we are like have made the perfect glass, let's make it look, crappy again because it looks too perfect. So it doesn't even always read so much as glass, but it's there.
That's what makes the colors, those rainbows of colors.
The prisms and the lights and
It's because of the glass.
Yeah, the color. That's why it's not black and white.
Exactly.
Because of the glass.
Yeah.
I think that one day I was like, Ania, I was like, it's going to give it color, the refraction of the light. And
Yeah,
you're like, amazing.
That was a major breakthrough. That was huge.
Another element is programmatic body part drawing. So in a fully on-chain artwork, you don't use any rasterized images. So there's like no JPEGs, no PNGs. Everything has to be drawn programmatically. And because we were doing art blocks, we couldn't use more than one library dependency. We could only use the P5 JS library. And so we couldn't also use an SVG library. So what we did is we basically like deconstructed SVGs and then turned them into essentially a text file and then told the P5 to basically draw this text file of numbers and coordinates to draw the body parts onto the canvas. We had to position the body parts. So we could only have something like, I don't remember the exact number, but we could only afford like 30 body parts. So we were like, let's scale them and place them in different places and rotate them so we can create variety for this collection of 400. So we were having like all these tricks of like, how do we optimize for the limitations of the blockchain? And it was like interesting because there was this dance, I think, where you had both the capabilities and the capacities and the limits of the technology of the human body, but also the technology of the blockchain.
A lot of people, when they see the images, they assume that if you see the hand like this or you see this, that means that the dance includes this shape. And that is actually not true. All the ways that the movement is represented in this is not so one-to-one. The only thing that is literally drawn from the movement is, it's very sneaky, these squiggles that you see here. In each one of the movements, I chose a signature bone. So I did a move, and then I thought, which bone in my body has the most interesting journey inside? Like if you drew what my knee did, if you drew what my wrist did, what does that line look like? And then I chose for each move which is the most interesting. And then in each output, it chose one of the movements and it drew the motion of the signature bone of that movement. So that is the only thing in these images that when you look, you can really see what the body did, but the silhouettes themselves are not related to the underlying dance sequence. We chose to detach it a bit more, except for that little nod, which I think is cute.
There's, if you're familiar with generative art, like art blocks or CryptoPunks, or you have in generative art projects a thing called traits, and traits are the things that like make things valuable if they're rare, and then you could flip them and make money, So it's something that's really, really important sometimes for people who trade generative art or have in the past. And you always look for the most rare piece. Like, I want the CryptoPunk with I don't even know if they have purple ties, but like, the one with the purple tie or the one with the cigarette or the one, and you always have, like, if you go on OpenSea and you look at, the CryptoPunks, for example, you can sort by traits and sort by rarity. And then we thought, wouldn't it be cool if there was no visual traits? Like, you couldn't like sort through the works. Like, I want the one that goes like this, or I want the one that is, really glassy, or I want the one that, whatever. And so we're like, let's make all of the traits choreographic so that it's like, is the performer like this way? Is there improv? Is there, half tempo? Is there vulnerability? And so we wanted to make vulnerability a trait because we thought, in programming and in tech, vulnerabilities are a bad thing. But we thought in art,
it's a good thing.
I think we need to embrace it. So we made vulnerability a feature
And
a trait.
also, vulnerability ended up being rare in the collection, which we liked because conceptually, then if vulnerability is rare, then vulnerability is more valuable. Fun.
And we didn't game the algorithm. We wanted to because I
were
really
tempted.
wanted.
We were so
Yeah.
tempted, and then it just happened naturally because
So
fate.
there's only 13 vulnerable pieces in the collection. So
So
vulnerability
is
rare.
now
Expensive. So we got to the process in which, like, okay, we have all these elements working together. Now we're going to tune the visual output. So for any of you who, make visual art with code, you know this process very well. It's, painstaking work, but you finally get there at some point. And we have 6 distinct looks. So the same algorithm, just with different acceptable parameter values, create this range of different looks. So this isn't 6 different algorithms. It's the same algorithm creating, different acceptable values of the parameters that it's ingesting from the choreographic algorithm and creating these outputs. So we also had to tune the choreographic output. And so we had finished the visual aspect more or less, or we're wrapping up with it. All the motion data is already stored on chain. It's already downsampled. But the next thing to do was to say, how's the algorithm doing? Is the algorithm producing the kind of dances we want? We know we're stuck with the moves. We can't redo the motion capture, but we can still fine tune the algorithm. So you went through a process of, I think, with 20 dancers or something in a couple different cities. One, we did a live show. Do you want to talk about that process a little bit?
Yeah, this we did what I called either a performed rehearsal or a rehearsed performance or a flip, something. Basically,
both were.
We were performing a rehearsal, but also it was a real rehearsal, but it was a performance. So anyways, in this, we ran the algorithm and then I had the dancers learn it live and then I watched it and we live tweaked it in order, like you just said, the movements were already set in stone.
I'm going to do a tech demo.
She's breaking our rules.
I'm going to do a tech demo.
Year of the Horse, 2026, we're breaking our own rules. Deja's actually going to do a tech demo right now.
I've prepared for you the Human Unreadable mainnet algorithm locally on my computer, and we can refresh and see Human Unreadables that are not part of the official collection. And what you'll see here, because I just did control inspect element and went to the console, and I could see the output here. And you can do this on any Human Unreadable. You go to Art Blocks, you view it in live view, and you'll be able to see the choreography, because the choreography existed before the image, because it created the image, right? So I'm going to let you continue talking, but I thought while you were talking, I'll keep refreshing.
So this is what we were doing in this performance rehearsal, where we would generate a new sequence and then the dancers would learn it live, perform it. As you can see, there is different tempos. And then I was writing notes to see how we needed to adjust it in order to get more desirable results, keeping the same movement, but still having different ways to adjust them so they felt more balanced when performed together.
But it's incredible to see the dancers memorize 31 moves, and then there's an improv move.
Dancers are the best.
And they would look at these numbers and they would just perform. I'm like, wow, how did you do that? Okay, the tech demo is over, and now back.
She did that for an hour today and then tried to have me sit and watch refreshing new outputs for 20 minutes.
It felt like testnet days, you know? Okay, this is the last line of that whole big method drawing that you saw in the beginning. And what this is describing here is how Act 2, right? How this element works in the workflow. So basically, what we did was we took all the 400 hashes. We created a Solidity generative model twin that mirrored what was because in Art Blocks, when you upload your code, it's all jammed into one long script. And we wanted to create our own custom smart contract, because we normally do that, but in this case, you have to use Art Blocks. So we're like, let's make our own smart contract and have that other secondary NFT tag along. And so what happens, the user connects their wallet, and then the NFT is minted, but it's only minted if they reveal it themselves. So we can't do that for them. So if someone loses access to their piece, we also can't release it or mint it for them. But basically what is happening is that all of those characters and all of the SVGs that make the final composition of an Act 2 token, they're all pulling from the same library. So we're not exporting images. These are fully on-chain rendered dynamic NFTs that are later then bound together. And they look something like this, and it looks something like this when collectors perform them. This is Jason Bailey.
I'm so obsessed with these moments. I felt like I really
that 10-second Wyeth is fire.
Yeah, when I saw people who would never dance suddenly curious to know the moves that made their thing. And then Jason sent me the sweetest message, and he was like, I actually wanted to be a dancer when I was growing up, but I was told it wasn't really for boys, and this gave me the most appropriate excuse to dance. And then he's filming himself in the backyard dancing. So I felt at this moment I kind of could just quit, because I was so happy about this audience that maybe never was interested or thinking about, or felt like they had the permission to care about dance, have taste in dance, or actually try it themselves, getting into their bodies through generative art. I thought was a really cool moment.
Mm-hmm. So that completes the process of what it took to create the work. And so sometimes when people see a Human Unreadable and they see this image, they're like, so you made a collage?
Not quite.
They're like, there's easier ways to make that image, right? We're like, yeah.
You could just make a dance
but it's
without doing all that.
Yeah. But it's 100% made with code. And this, we tweeted the day of the sale because we were so excited about the idea of people collecting choreography and will this work? Will people? And we just went for it. We're hundreds of people will have collected choreography by the end of the day, and they did. And even though they rocked up maybe for art blocks or for some generative art, they were also collecting generative choreography. I think to just close out, we can talk about basically how the method has been adapted and where we've brought it. Yeah.
We solved many of the problems we were having with our own practice and just to achieve Human Unreadable. Making movement sequences collectible as an art object, trying to make it so there is value attributed to dance other than as a service industry, which is typically how it's treated. And I'm from LA, and so the dancers there, it's if you're a star dancer, you're on tour with someone, or you're in a music video, there's not really economic infrastructure for someone who designs movement and treats movement as an art form. How can you sell a gesture? And maybe the reason why we don't see a gesture as a fine artwork is because there's not the infrastructure for that to be recognized. So a huge thing for us, and this moment actually last year, I loved. So since this project was financially successful, now people own choreographic sequences, and we were we made this method for us, but we now also see that it's way bigger than us, and it could be part of kind of a different and a transformed, and I would say an evolved future for funding of the performing arts in the future if other people are using this method, and dance can be treated as an art object. So to see a dancer that I casted in Hong Kong, I worked with all these dancers there, at an Art Basel event, Art Basel doesn't care about dance because it's about the market and there's no market for movement. So having dancers on the Art Basel stage where we're talking about our method, talking about owning dance, talking about transforming the future of the performing arts using the method, super important to us. It's not just about what we did, but how can this be built upon and expanded for other people to use, and also more people who work with movement as an art form, not as a service, to have a way to sustain themselves financially. So it's been used by a few different projects. The second application after Human Unreadable was Goddess Variations by Hermine Bourdon, who is a sculptor, she's not a sculpture. She's a person. And she's a sculptor, and she makes these beautiful Paleolithic sculptures where she was I want to bring my sculpture to life through dance. And she was doing a collaboration with a Paris opera dancer, Eugenie. And so we created a whole narrative around the goddess. What would this sculpture do if she could move? basically what would her movements be. And then this turned into something that was performed at Garnier and used our method. And it's the first time that something at Opera Garnier was collectible. And it was using our method. And this is a collection of 100 pieces. And each one of the pieces is connected to a certain segment of this sculpture solo.
Oh, this has audio.
Oh yeah, repeat is necessary. This was our third application, our work we did last year. This was in Turkey, in Bodrum.
So this is an artwork with 40 works. We developed a notation system for this, but we used that similar method of how we developed Act 2 for Human Unreadable, where it's an SVG library. Everything is fully on chain. But we didn't just have those 40 scores. We had the artwork sold as the performance itself. And so we extended the method into this fully on-chain architecture, into a performance operating system, where essentially it's a suite of about 15 smart contracts, actually hundreds, but because we're storing, we found an even cheaper way to store motion data on chain. If anyone would like that hack, come and grab me.
And anyone wants
I will
that
send
hack
you.
right now.
I will send you how he did it, a whole documentation on it. But basically, for like $150, we were able to store all the SVGs and also the motion data as well. It was amazing. But what we did, that's why there's hundreds of smart contracts, because we kind of hacked that storage, abused the medium a little bit. But what we have here is a registry contract, right? So this is a suite of Solidity contracts. And this is, what the collector collects, right? But we also have a contract with that collector. They have the restaging rights for the performance.
So someone owns the performance, but they're buying the system that allows them to generate the performance in the future without us. So it's like a performance in a box with all of the elements, just to be clear, because there's the works, and then there's someone who bought the whole system in order to generate it independent of our involvement.
And it has that connection, like you say, you use the word generative right there, where the operating system is, even though it's this suite of smart contracts on the Ethereum blockchain, it's a generative system in the sense that you can take this simple rule set, you can take all of these elements, you can take everything here you need in order to make the performance again. You have the music, you have the notation legend, you have a performance provenance contract that is updatable with a multi-sig, motion data, movement library, the costume design, video reference that Ania finished today, actually, where it has all the time codes of the 40 pieces that are stored on chain, have an ASCII sort of marker of where in the video what correlates to the video reference of the actual show, the music score, choreographic direction. So it's really meant to be this, rule set, this sort of generative system of performance in a box that is stored on chain that the collector can take, and it can be restaged. This also solves a really big problem, at least for us, when we think about how to archive performance as well. And when we're not here at some point, how can this be documented and restage with the artist's intent?
Claude would speak for the artist's intent in that case.
Claude our cat, not Claude Code.
No. Yeah. Claude the cat, the furry one.
Claude Code would also speak for the artist's intent, but yeah. So
yeah, it's a duet.
This is an extension of the method. And so all of this is being open sourced and taught at universities, and we are making available to anyone to use this system and bring it to hopefully places beyond that we have. And application 4, which is
the final
last
application, and then
Well,
we'll
for
wrap
right
up
now.
because I'm aware we're pretty over.
Yeah.
And Olivia Cordera, who we mentioned earlier, a pioneer in computational choreography and now a very dear friend. So she learned kind of the original German expressionist dance from Laban, and then one of her students left and moved to Brazil. And Olivia studied directly underneath Maria. And in that time, Laban movement was kind of like transformed into something else and lost some of its original roots. And then Olivia told me one day, I really want to share what I learned, like the version of Laban German expressionist dance, Ausdrucksdance. I want to share this with you so you can pass it on. So then we had these long conversations about how can we preserve this technique that, and Olivia is literally like, I'm going to die and I don't know how many people know these steps and this approach. So we did a kind of like knowledge transfer in New York last October. And then we're discussing with her how we can kind of use the method to disseminate this pretty radical way of thinking about movement and the body that has nothing to do with technique and training and doing things right, but a very human way of allowing people a framework to get into their bodies and kind of like pull from the inside, which I think a lot of us, especially in the digital sphere, are feeling like is a little more important than ever, that we kind of figure out what our body has to say. So this is a fourth method that will be very different, kind of like preservation, dissemination of this technique.
And so I'll leave you with 2 final notes. One, please come to New York in November of this year and see the finale of Human Unreadable, Act 3. We've been working on this since 2022. So 2026, some years have passed. And so we will finish that artwork and then make something else other than Human Unreadable and spend our time somewhere else. And the last note that I want to say is that, in this process of making this work and in our practice, we really look to uncover the possibility that just because we're embracing technology doesn't mean we have to abandon the body. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions? I'd like to. Yes. When it comes to the world creating this thing, I wonder if you have a sense of who are the other artists that you connect to, and like what is it at sort of peers? Like, do you feel like other people are doing things similar to what you do, or who you connect to that way that you're doing something that's anonymous, like people that see this up?
The person that comes to mind who's doing interesting work with the body and technology is Lauren Lee McCarthy. So she immediately comes to mind. But
she invented P5JS.
Yes, she's the inventor of P5JS, but like super technical, but also very human, like very personal work, like using her body in really interesting ways, merging performance and like durational installations. She comes to mind. I mean, she's someone that I really admire in terms of people working from like movement as an art form, not like I'm a technologist and I'll get a dancer to do this, but like someone who's a movement artist and someone who's a technologist. I don't know that many people in this field, to be honest. Do you?
I know they exist, but I don't know them.
Yeah, Lauren comes to mind.
Lauren would have been what? Lauren Lee McCarthy is incredible, so I definitely suggest checking her out. Yeah. Yes.
How was the planning of this project? You were like 9 months. It started as a 9 month. And probably after budget for that.
Yeah.
And you were working since today. You mentioned you were before a blockchain, which was bonus, and we had a team of 25. One year was also, and my friend was for years to work out the sake of the team by itself. So how was that? Was it, especially the growth part?
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, I did have all these years before operator, and before I was doing my own practice solo. I had a multimedia design studio, and so I was able to get some chops of how to, some production chops, like how to manage big teams and how to manage a budget and like how you do fabrication and how do you make everything work, within a time frame with this deadline, because like all those things are like feel so anti-art, it's like deadlines
So many
and like,
logistics.
and like budgets and like all these things. But for us, both of us, production is very much part of the craft of the work, because there's thousands and thousands, 10,000s and thousands of decisions that need to be made. And in every moment you're making that decision, like you're shaping the art, And so for us, like while we work, I mean, that project didn't have a producer. We produced the project, which is crazy. But like we try to work with producers when we can, if we can afford them, if it's in the budget, for example. So, I think that like it does have this like very unsexy, not the non-glamorous, element to project management and like production management. So that is definitely there. And then for blockchain, we met Isaac. It's like we were doing something that didn't exist at that time. Like there weren't tools that we could just kind of pull together and, tweak and like there's our project. So we had to like Isaac was like, this project was like it would have been impossible to spec. Like it would have just been zero possibility. So I think it's like the power of finding the most incredible human collaborators that you can find, and who are willing to go on that journey with you. And so like Isaac, for example, who we met at Glitch Residency, which is run by Primavera Di Filippi. And she had Isaac there. We met him in 2022, and we were describing this project. He's like, "Oh yeah, I've never made generative art before, and I have no." He was like, "But yeah, I can." But he's an incredible engineer, and I think that tells you sometimes that like, and we had to like keep approaching other engineers. We're like, we're trying to do this thing, and they're like, yeah, I guess we could like figure, and so bit by bit, we just found the right people. But I think being able to, it's like you find the people, but then also sustain them because people get tired, especially when you're doing that level of experimentation. And you're running into like so many walls and,
And there's no reference.
And there's no reference. Like we were fortunate to just have the best collaborators on the project to make that happen, who also had the patience to endure that last 5% when like, it's like everything technically is working. I don't even know why we're changing things. We're like, trust me. It's, did I answer all the questions, or was there another one in there? Okay, cool. Any other questions? Yes.
But just a quick question. Maybe I missed it. I don't know if you said it. Why glass?
Yeah. Here's the last 15 minutes of the presentation we didn't give you.
I feel like the answer is pretty simple. The whole privacy collection is about, we're thinking like, what do all of these collections have in common, all of our works in this collection? And we're looking at the tension between privacy and transparency in blockchain technology. And so transparency was something that like we knew we wanted to think about, and like what better material to choose to think about that than glass. So that's why the first thing has this glass key. The second one, I have a glass avatar. The third one, privacy portraits, we're using acrylic. But it was like, yeah, transparency as a material, which is why we put it in all of the collections.
I really don't know if you come from the NFT world before. I mean, if you've been around. Okay. I'm surprised how far you went because even for people that were in the space, it was like, why did they do that? I mean, yeah, but it's difficult to understand why you put so much effort in going so deep in the technology. And you were saying like literally hacking. I did that too. The hacking the smart contracts to it's well, it's complicated, but I get it. But I'm an engineer. You're an engineer, but you're not.
I'm not.
So, when did you say I want to go all in on this and go within that level of detail? Because not only from the visual perspective, you can like or dislike the project, but from the technical point of view, I own one of your pieces. I was one of the few that unveiled it. It was all the time like surprise. Like, I mean, there's Easter eggs everywhere. I mean, why?
This has been a thread before blockchain, this like why. For that installation we had at SCAD Museum of Art in 2019 called On View, everything was using the golden ratio. So like the push plates on the door were these absurd dimensions. And they were like, I really don't think anyone's going to notice that the shape of the thing that you use to push open this door is not, standard, but is like golden ratio stuff. And they were just like, this is wild. So it's not just related to our blockchain projects or this. It's pretty much everything that we have ever done has like, it could have a dissertation on, like you said, like these Easter eggs and details that like literally no one notices, but really excite us for some reason.
I would just add one other perspective to that. And by the way, I like this new perspective. We should have switched earlier.
Yeah, we should have been walking around.
Yeah. I'm going to stay over here though. I also felt an enormous, like it's a very public thing to do an Art Blocks release. It's like I was kind of shy, like embarrassed or something. Like I don't know. It just was. I was feeling really nervous beforehand, and like as we were getting closer to the date, I was like, oh my gosh, this could like go really bad, and like that's kind of embarrassing. But whatever. We're gonna do this anyway. But I think like we already function that way, no matter what, as like a sort of as a sort of like salutation
to craft,
the salutation to concept. And so that is just like inherently with me. I'm like, as long as I can look at this and say like I served the concept in every way I know how, then I'm happy with the work. And then I think there was like this other element of it was the first major commercial project that we did. I was like, this needs to be really art tight because it's like I was like the last thing that I want is for to have like a commercial project. But I was like, we need to bring our A game.
But like commercial means sacrificing the art. Like we really wanted to make sure if this is going to do well financially, then we don't want it to be like we had to sacrifice doing what we wanted to do in order to do something that's sold. So we were like having this, yeah, exactly like you said, like if people are going to buy it, it's going to be collected, then we really want to make sure that it's also completely us, completely everything we wanted to do, zero sacrifice on anything, so that we felt good about that relationship to the market, which was like pretty new for us.
I had a question that was related to that in the generation world, and I was wondering if working through this journey that they could be some way to have volumes that you could reach, or maybe I've seen it with the task force, just somebody there as market, and this kind of because it's too much. Sensation maybe the kind of works in mental or not just things as hands, because when things were very commercial in a way.
For me, as a choreographer and dancer who just sees theaters closing everywhere, all my friends who had independent dance companies having to cease operations, I'm very excited when like a bunch of crypto bros are like texting us on Discord, like, when's the performance? You know, I'm like, we might have the next generation of performance patrons that are really excited about and supporting dance and dancers because they have a piece in their collection, so they now feel like it's theirs. So while it's not a super romantic notion to think that just because you introduce ownership and now I feel like I care about this thing, I'm kind of a realist when it comes to, like, I just see the problems and I see an audience that is very interested and excited about technology, and this as kind of a way to um, bring more people into curiosity and support of mediums that honestly, like, without serious socio and like economic infrastructure reform, I see dying. Like, we'll have Broadway left and that's it. And like, Broadway's great, but that's not the extent of the performing arts. So for me, I'm just happy that there are new audiences that are excited and that are spending money on in getting excited to come see a performance in New York when maybe they just were looking to like make E.A.T that day and then they ended up here. So for me, it's a very different audience than I ever expected to reach, but it's an audience that could be part of us trying to change the trajectory of the performing arts in the future.
So yeah, I align with what Ania just said. I also feel that it was intentional from the beginning to start in a more crypto culture world with this project because we knew like that's where the energy was, and if they could get excited about generative art visually, like maybe we can get them excited about dance too, and maybe we can pull them, like Ani was saying, to the museum, which we kind of invented in our mind because there was no museum who wanted to show Act 3 when we started the project. So we were like, and the show will be in an institution, and it wasn't
Until that became true.
until that became true at one point. And what I like about is when we arrive to Act 3 in New York, what we'll find is you'll have folks from the crypto world and you'll have folks who are coming because they've been going to that museum every day of their life or every month of their life since for the last 20, 30 years or whatever. And they're going to come and they're going to see this performance and they're not even going to think I'm seeing something that has anything to do with any NFTs, anything that has to do with blockchain. But actually it's like, no, this could be the kind of art that you like too, and hopefully is disarming and hopefully these kind of different worlds coming together. I think, we'll produce something for sure, but what we'll see.
Thank you.